next guest, who is none other than someone I think that many of us in DC know because he's always been active. This Mr. Ron Hampton, who is a retired Metropolitan Police officer, in advocacy for justice in the community, and still on the forefront. Ron, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How you doing, Denise?
Pretty good, pretty good. I mean,
Good to be with you today.
Likewise. You're looking well.
The same, I always see you around and, doing the newspaper thing, but it's always good to talk to you in person.
Likewise, likewise. There's a lot going on. There's so much going on when we talk about policing. Everything from defund the police to, new police chiefs being named to changing how police departments are being funded. And you're retired. It's like the chairman. I mean, when you look on to what's happening right now, I mean, what's the big issue that bubbles up inside of you?
Change, and whether or not it's going to be successful. Because these aren't new issues. Your father and I were dealing with these issues, and also your mother. Back in the 70s and 80s, and at some point you get frustrated because you are supporting and advocating for these changes, and we know that there's some basis for them. A great deal of research and studies that have been done over the years. Reports have been written and submitted. However, a lot of them end up sitting on bookshelves somewhere. So the idea is change going to really be possible? And are we going to see that change and feel good about it? So I don't know. I'm optimistic and continue to be optimistic, but I just think that's our challenge.
Did you serve with at any point either with or alongside Chief Conti?
Well,
acting chief, I should say.
Yeah. Conti came on in '89. We know each other, and we've been on over the years. We've served on a couple of panels after I retired. And here in the city, we recently, this was about 2 or 3 years ago, the Jewish community at that church up on Military Road, the synagogue rather. There were some panel discussions. We had a chance to talk. I've always paid attention to him because I really truly believe he was ready to be chief of police when the mayor chose Newsom. Because Conti has been around. He's served as several district commanders. He's been over SOD. He's been in the department paying attention to the kind of things. And he's a guy who's serious, And the other thing about him, he reminds me somewhat of some of the old Black leaders because he is a policeman's policeman. The rank and file guys like him. He's a likable guy. And where that has its place, I think the strongest thing is that he recognizes that this is a time for change. And so he has articulated several areas and concerns that, our community has in relationship to a change. And that's what they want to hear. It may not be that we get everything that we want, but you have to, I believe you have to look at them, you have to try it because we've been doing some of this stuff for over 150 years and the results we know haven't been what we wanted them to be. Something new.
Right. One of the questions that Councilmember Gray tried to pin him on at the hearing yesterday was about providing tax-free housing. So in other words, with 17% of the Metropolitan Police Department living in the District of Columbia, which means, that's doing the math, 87% are non-district residents. And those, even though they live outside of the city, some of them live pretty far outside of the city, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, places like that. And so, the question was, would you support a bill that he wants to propose that would give police officers that live in the District of Columbia, they would not be forced to pay or required to pay DC taxes. He didn't want to answer that question specifically. He said he had to look into it more. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I believe in residency. I really do. And I was on the police force at a time when Marion and Ms. Rolark and others supported residency, because it's not only about you living in the city, it's about what happens to you and around you while you live in the city and what you bring to the city. There is a component of economics that's associated with that. Police officers make a lot of money. Their families, if they're going to live in the city, then they're going to bring resources and other things to the city. And it provides a measure of safety for the communities that they live in when individual police officers live in those communities. And we had residency for a long time. Some in that context of things, the FOP was successful in convincing John Ray to come up with what they call preference rather than residency. And the claim was that police officers didn't want to live in the city. Well, we testified against that. We, meaning I represented the Black Police Association at that time. And there was no evidence that people were singling out police officers because they was police officers to hurt them or their family, anything like that. They just didn't want to live here in the city. So I don't know if that's going to be, I don't know how that's going to end up. I know that I've seen legislation and policy around for teachers and other DC government residents that enable them to have a down payment or assistance to get homes in the city because they're expensive. But I don't know about what it is that Mr. Gray is proposing, or is that going to be effective? What we ought to just do is just go straight to a residency requirement. We require the chief of police to live in the city. We require city council members to live in the city. So I think it's right for police officers and firefighters to live in the city, and the things that go along with that happen to be a benefit to our city.
Also, the acting chief himself is supposed to be trying to sort of investigate some of the rank and file right now to find out if any of them have ties to white nationalist groups. I'm wondering, when you were on the department, did you have that smell test as well to see where these guys coming from? And not only, I mean, white nationalist groups or any other sort of groups that may have had impacted their policing in the city. What's your take on that?
Well, I think the chief is right, and I think we need to be paying attention. We need to be clamping down on the processes that we use to bring people into service here, and where they come from. What did they do? What was going on where they lived? Because even in my time, we brought a lot of guys out of West Virginia and Pennsylvania and all those other kind of hilly urban places. And I remember Miss Goldie Johnson. I know you remember Miss Goldie Johnson. We had identified an individual. I worked in the 3rd District. We had identified an individual who was a member of the Klan. And Miss Goldie Johnson and I and some other Black police officers had a press conference up in the 3rd District in front of the precinct. And Miss Johnson put on a sheet with the eyes and mouth cut out, talking about the individual. So, it isn't a recent phenomenon, but it's one that has always been available in policing, because they can come in sort of under the attention of everything that's going on. And then they get a chance to do some of the kind of things that they have done historically in our city. At the height of our city, we were close to over 70% Black folk living in the city. And at one time we had about 60% of people in the city who were police officers. But when I first started, only about 19% of the force. And so those guys who wanted to participate in that discriminatory behavior, they was having a field day. It was just unbelievable.
So Ron, because we run out of time, but I also want to ask, I mean, in this climate of that's sort of against anti-police, defund police, but we know communities really the first person they're going to call will be the police if they have a problem. But what do we do about recruitment? I know you're doing a lot of community service work or community engagement work. But if we require DC residents, I'm just curious, what are we doing about recruiting local folks, young people, to even consider the police department?
The same program that started Conti is one of the best programs in the world because it creates a ready reservoir of people that come into the system. And it's anchored to our school system. And our school system happens to be majority Black. And then the next majority in our school system is Spanish-speaking individuals. So that's a good system. We need to be more, I think in terms of other folk, we need to be tapping Howard University, UDC, some of the other historical Black colleges and universities in the area. And we need to talk about it in the way of what it is that African-American and Hispanic-speaking students bring to the force. And then if we're going to emphasize on that, then that needs to be a value and have a worth once they get on the force. In other words, you can't bring them here because they have something that you need, and then when you get here, then you relegate them to patrol for 15 years and they don't get a chance to use their skills. So the police department has a responsibility not only to attract people from academia and other places, recruit college students, but it also has a responsibility and obligation to assign a worth to what it is that they bring when they get here. I saw that with Bertel Jefferson. I saw that with Maurice Turner. I saw that with Ike Fullwood. I haven't seen it in a very long time, and see, we've gone back. But I think Conti can do it. I mean, he has to know that our community has these expectations of him, and we're willing to not only stand with him, but we're willing to stand behind him if he's willing to work on the things that make our community whole.
Well, I don't have to ask you if you would support him as chief, because it sounds like you are there with those ifs. Ifs.
Yeah, with some conditions. Yeah, you're right.
With conditions. Yeah.
Yeah, with conditions, and I think he understands that.
Right.
He understands it because there's another community in our city, Denise, who has conditions on them too.
No question. Ron, thank you so very much for being with us. I really enjoyed this conversation. We're going to have you back because there are some other issues I know that the city, like none of this is new, right?
That's right.
And so, I want to talk to you some more about some of the other things that are happening. So just when we call, answer, and we're going to have you back on, okay?
All right. It's a pleasure. Take care of yourself, Denise.
Likewise. You too.
Okay, then.
All righty. Thank you much.